Hello. Welcome to another Fraggin' Podcast. I'm Marty, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Dan.
I'm Joseph.
If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you're tuning in again, thank you so much for returning. We're so glad to have you back. Today's episode is Made in the 80s, and we'll be discussing amazing horror films of the 1980s. As a note, before we get started, during this episode of the podcast, we'll be discussing horror films from the 1980s. Many of these films include violence, gore, sensitive thematic elements, and cultural beliefs and behaviors typical of the time period that may now be considered inappropriate. This is a general warning that our conversation may touch on some of these elements. And let's get into it.
Fair.
I'm so excited. I think first on our list is The Fly. And I have to say that I love this movie, and not just because it has Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, who are both absolutely phenomenal. I think it's a fun little movie. It starts out so fast. There's no
I would say fun in quotes.
Fun.
There are definitely moments that are less fun. But it starts out like you're thrown right into the middle. There's no like slow introduction. You're thrown right in, and it is staying at that pace very fast the entire time.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before the podcast, and I was actually really surprised during my rewatch of this film because I haven't seen this film in, I've got to say, at least 20 years or so. And I was really shocked at how quickly it got into the meat of the story, because usually films from this time period have a very long intro period of like 30 minutes before you get to the actual like crux of what's going on. And literally, it was like within the first 5 minutes, I think. It's faster than what you see nowadays.
Yeah, no, you're thrown right in. I love that for the most part, it's really just Jeff and Gina, like Seth and Veronica, almost the entire movie. We just have these two characters playing off each other, which is amazing. We do have the jealous ex-boyfriend coming in, but really, for such an iconic movie, the cast is so small. And we'll get into a couple movies later that have like a huge, amazing cast.
Yeah.
But this small cast, the special effects, one of my favorite things rewatching a lot of these movies was how much I love the practical effects that we got in like the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. We got these really amazing practical effects. And I'm like, I actually prefer this over a lot of CGI. Like,
I do too. Actually, we rewatched like 5 of these over the last 2 days, I think. And almost all of them had what you said, like these practical effects that when I was a kid, I just remember these were so realistic. And now I'm thinking to myself, they're quite good. They are more realistic than some of these CGI elements that we see in these big production nowadays. And I think that adds a little bit to the horror element of these films.
Yes.
This is something tangible that the actors can interact with.
I love it. And I love the model making that goes behind all those practical effects. It's so intense and so precise. And it has so much soul to it, I think, is what makes those movies so iconic to me. And even sci-fi films of that era so iconic, right? Is that you had this kind of soul because it's art and it looks so realistic. And it's something that CGI cannot replace, right? Like there's a place for CGI, but I think just going full CGI without practical effects is a mistake. And I think Lucas saw that with the prequel trilogy, and they kind of went back to more practical effects ongoing. And one of the things that makes 80s horror so, I think, scary is the amount of practical effects. So I agree 100%.
Yes.
And I think Van you totally hit it when you said that like the small cast just was so perfect for each other. There was so much like the tension between these two actors on the film, like on the screen, was they were made to be the two runners of this film, and they just worked so well together. They had so much chemistry, both for the romantic side of the relationship, and then they just quickly shifted over to this horror side of it. And I mean, I don't, people like to make fun of the 80s horror films nowadays, but The Fly in particular, I have to say, I think that was some of the best acting I have seen from any film, let alone a film from the 80s. I think Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis just knocked it out of the park. But Gina Davis in particular, I mean, she was
so good.
She was just so good. She was so good in that role. I mean, she made it scary to me because I believed her response to what was going on around her.
Yeah. Like her confusion, her fear. I believed it. I was there with her every step of the way. Like every step of the way. And possibly
something too that I really love about.
Go ahead.
No, go.
I was just gonna say, it's possibly my second favorite Jeff Goldblum movie.
It's so funny because I'd only seen this movie, I think, once when I was younger. We had like a tradition in our family of horror films. Every Mother's Day, we would watch the B-rated horror films from the 50s because my mom was really into like the old black and white 50s horror films. We watched a lot of those, like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, the original Body Snatchers. We watched the original Fly a lot. And so whenever I think of The Fly, I keep thinking of like the old version of it. And then rewatching this one yesterday, I was just shocked on how they built on that lore. I'd forgotten how frightening they made it. And I feel like horror films in the 80s really did a fantastic job of really digging into your fears, like those primal fears that people have.
Yeah.
And
I think this movie traumatized music.
This movie definitely left an impact on me as a child because my mom is an amazing person. And she did not let me watch certain things, but she let me watch The Fly, which was odd, but she still did it. I mean, I was like 8 at the time. What I loved about it was the sciencey side behind it. Was just amazing, as I think I just saw a fly buzzing around.
Yeah, there's definitely a fly hanging out with me.
So Jeff Goldblum is like sending his aura to you to endorse the podcast.
Next time, can you send dinosaurs, Jeff? I would prefer the dinosaurs, but okay, we'll take a fly.
But I love the full science
of it was really cool, and I think a lot of these films that we're going to talk about today have kind of that. Like there's another film I had where we're typing onto the computer, what's the probability of this and that, and genetic coding, and so definitely a trend I think in the 80s for these kinds of horror films, and it was really cool to see it in The Fly, but it worked. It worked as a way of telling the audience exactly what was going on without overtelling them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it moved the pace faster. I think it really picked up the pace of the film. I think that's why it was a 90-minute movie instead of a 2-hour movie. I think if they made The Fly now, you'd probably get almost 2.5 hours of just the scientific side of it. Maybe was not really necessary to.
Like when you say, it was a 90-minute movie, I'm like, what? I feel like I was sad.
I was surprised.
For 3 hours. Like it just has so much in it, and it's just.
I have to say too,
it's just a short little film. It's just a little guy.
And the funny thing too about watching all these 80s movies is to kind of see the difference between who was a movie star in that time period versus who is a movie star now. I feel like the people that you see in these 80s horror films, they look like regular people. It could be you at home. This could be something that happened to you. Could be something that happened to somebody you know. It's not like we have there's Hemsworth on screen, where it's like, okay, well, a little bit unbelievable. There's not that many people in the world that look like that. I thought it was a really, the way that they did Jeff Goldblum in that film, the way that they he was fit, fly fit, I guess, but not what we would call modern day fit. Yeah, I don't know. And there's other films we'll talk about today that have the same thing. But
I love that fly fit.
Fit is a fly. Fly fit. But yeah, that sort of that body horror. There's a lot of these films in this list. Body horror, cosmic horror. That was like a huge thing in the 80s, is what I'm getting. I never put that connection together until rewatching all these films.
Definitely a lot of body horror going on. We get to see Seth slowly transform, and even though I love this movie, there are a couple points in this movie where I'm struggling to actually watch it. I'm watching between my hands because I'm I don't really need to see him taking pieces of himself off of himself. I'm not big into gore.
And that happened in a lot of these movies. Yeah, a lot of these
movies get really gory, and I know that this is just a really cool practical effect. So I want to watch. I think this is fascinating. I'm trying to break down how they're doing this. I grew up doing a lot of theater, so this is fascinating. This is cool, but at the same time, it's pretty realistic. If anyone has ever lost a fingernail, that's pretty. It's way more realistic than I feel like it has any business being. When he loses his teeth,
I was gonna say the teeth scene.
How many grown adults have nightmares about losing their teeth? It's a very, very common nightmare. So throwing that in, creepy, unsettling. So I really, really loved. We see him struggling with his transformation, but then later accepting it, which is fascinating. We could break that down for probably longer than the movie was. We could sit here for 92 minutes just talking about that.
But then something I like that a lot of these horror protagonists, if they weren't afraid to have the horror protagonist go to the dark side, so to speak, before the end of the film.
Yeah.
Or not survive at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's fine. So 2 weeks ago, last podcast, we covered villains, and we were talking about villains.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was fresh in my mind watching several of these. I don't think there is a villain in The Fly.
Science is the villain.
Science is the villain.
Yeah.
Misused science, maybe. Not doing science while drunk, probably. Because this all happened because he got in there when he was drunk and mad because his girl left. But he does turn into a monster, yes. And he does do some questionable things as said monster, but
But the question is how much of it is him at the end and how much of it is the Fly?
Exactly.
Right? How much of it is the Fly choosing to do these quote unquote evil things, but it's just a fly trying to live out its normal fly life cycle.
It's really about survival for him at the end. Everything he's doing at the end is oh, well, this is the best way for me to continue on. So you could almost say that the ex-boyfriend Stathis, which he's awful. He's kind of terrible the whole time. He's terrible and controlling and manipulative.
Yeah, up until the last 5 seconds.
But in the end, she goes to him and she's like, I am pregnant. I need an abortion. I need it right now. And she is very reasonably upset and distraught because of her terrifying nightmare that she had of giving birth to a weird baguette.
Which I think I have to give my official apology to Ridley Scott. All these years, I thought that Alien was the reason I had that fear. I thought it was the chest burster scene, and I'm pretty sure now after watching The Fly that it was The Fly. I think I saw The Fly way too young.
It was The Fly the whole time.
It was the fly.
But I mean, he comes in, he steps up, he in the middle of the night takes her to get this, even though that ends up failing. Um, she gets kidnapped out of the office by Brundle, and he goes to his house with a shotgun. Like, is he the greatest guy on the planet? No. Does he come in clutch in a crisis?
I think I
I'm
have
not.
to agree with Joseph here. I think science is the villain in this movie. I think science is the villain.
I think alcohol is the
because
villain.
at the end of the day, well, alcohol too. Science and alcohol, they don't mix, right? I feel
They
like
don't mix.
if it weren't for him, because look, even before the alcohol, I mean, what he did to the baboon, I mean, to me, that's already kind of virgin on the side of the villain. He didn't have to pick an animal so close to humanity. He could have picked an animal. He could have started small. He could have started with a fly.
Flies.
Yeah. So I think misuse of science.
And look, what's terrifying to me in this whole thing is that regardless of his miscalculation, right, he's trying to transport himself, and the science behind that, like, he tests it on a lot. Look, what the actual villain is not following proper protocol, scientific protocol, right, and not having like proper test subjects, because the whole let me just test this on myself. Come on, where are your controls, man? Like, just
I mean, he jumped from a stalking to a baboon. Like,
he did.
What?
it's
I
it's very
I
typical.
think it never would have happened if he hadn't have been drinking and upset. So,
I mean,
alcohol and
again,
science, bad combination. Don't mix the two. I feel like that's safe.
Yes.
Don't drink and drive. Don't drink in science.
Don't drink and fly. I mean, like fly, like little fly.
ooh, I've managed to freeze myself. So,
But I have to say, like, all in all, sometimes you go back and you watch these old horror films from the 80s and you laugh. I did not laugh while I watched The Fly. I was like, I literally, like, I don't gross out too easily, I don't think. I don't get too scared too easily, but like there were some scenes where I was literally like, oh, it was a little
Yeah.
it was a little much. I mean, it was on the edge there. I can see why, like, it had to have been. Does anybody know? Was it close to like censorship in theaters? Because I feel like, it's up there with some of the other ones. I know that some of the other ones on our list were like they had to cut a lot in order to make it
I'm
an R rating.
I'm sure
Maybe that's why it's
was a different
short.
cut in the theater, because I don't think they were getting that cut in the theater. But I don't know. I do not know. That is a good question. So Joseph was having technical difficulties. I guess it was his turn. We might wait for a second for him to pop back in.
But if you're just joining us, we are talking about The Fly with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, which
Everything
honestly,
they're in, I love.
I didn't think I was going to put this up there as some of my top horror films, but I think this one has to be up there. It's good.
So good.
And it's so different from the original. It's so different. I don't know if you've seen the old one.
It is.
But the old that final scene in the old one where like it's not this amalgamation into one man. It's like the man has been separated into two different entities and like one has a fly head or I mean, that's like you can laugh at. I felt like they took that and they just were like, how do we make this actually scary? And you're right, that scene at the end where he comes out of the transporter, I mean, they should have done that on Star Trek. They should have done that a little bit. I mean, they kind of hinted at it on some Star Trek episodes, but they should have done that where they actually showed like what happens. Yeah, but that was a creepy monster.
It was a creepy monster.
Because especially because there was something to me about how the creature like was pulling along that extra limb as he's crawling out of the transporter, and I was just like, I mean, it was thoroughly unnecessary, but like for the creep factor, like it really upped how horrifying it was, like what he had done to himself.
Yeah.
No, Jeff Goldblum. No.
Jeff, don't do this.
But even just the subtle stuff at the beginning, like where his skin is like getting bad, and at first you're like, oh, it's like acne.
Yeah,
And then
that's
you're
not
thinking
that
back to
bad.
like when you were younger, you're like, yeah, sometimes people have like these horrible acne dreams. And I'm just like, and then of course, like it starts peeling off, and you're just like, this is intense. This is intense.
This is ooh, Joseph, you are
Welcome
back.
back, Joseph.
Yeah, my machine decided to freeze on me. Speaking of science, see, this is what happens when I talk about science. And I
Yeah, don't talk shit about science anymore, Joseph.
I think we're going to be talking a lot of shit about science when we get to some of these other movies. Because there's another one that's very fly-like. That is like on my radar here.
Yes. Oh, do we
for
want
science.
to move on now that
Let's go
Joseph
to the
is
next one.
back? The
Yes.
Lost Boys is next. I have to say, I fell asleep rewatching it last night.
What?
I fell asleep to horror movies. Like the last 2 weeks trying to watch these, I kept falling asleep. That's a whole other thing. I'll get back into therapy and unpack that at some time. Like it's fine. It's fine. I love how this is Peter Pan with vampires.
Yes. Yes. This
It-
movie, you know, you have to give props to Lost Boys for the fact that it has one of the greatest soundtracks of all time.
It does. It's so
right
good.
off, the music is so good. Like, it's so good. I mean, it's peak epic 80s music.
And the cast is
perfect. Cast is
it's
perfect.
a huge cast. We were just talking
a
about
huge
The
cast.
Fly, and it's very small cast. This is a huge cast.
And it's a huge
Yeah.
cast that went on to do a lot of other things. I mean, there are some
Yes.
big names in here.
There's some really big names in here, but there isn't a single person that comes on the screen and does not just act their heart out. Because this is very realistic to me, especially the two brothers, Michael and Sam. Like,
Yeah.
those are definitely brothers the whole time. And I love them. I love them so much.
This whole movie was
I just love this idea of go for it.
I was gonna say this is just like peak 80s everything culture, from the hair
Yeah.
to the music to the outfits to like just the interactions with people in general, right? This is like
Right.
a defining moment of the 80s. Sorry.
And it's a defining like location too. I mean, like this was a specific place in the 80s. That, like the name of the city in the movie is like made up. It's fiction, but it's an actual place. Like it definitely had the culture of the times. But I just love this idea of like vampires, because we don't really ever find out how old these vampires are. They don't really tell us. We assume, I think, that they are 80s vampires, but like they could be 100 years old. But choosing to look like these teens from the 80s, to me, I just think it's great.
Well, let's be cool. Let's be honest. The 80s was cool, so why wouldn't you want to be like an 80s defining type vampire? Like, you want to find new victims, you've got to like dress for the part.
Yeah. I think they're definitely hinted at as being much older, because if you start breaking down their costumes, the costume department in this movie, they killed it.
did.
This was just phenomenally done. So 80s costumes in general, beautiful, amazing. But we have these vampires that very clearly are very bad boy 80s, but if you start breaking down their costumes, a lot of it looks a lot older. There's a piece here and a piece there on most of them
That's true.
that is not from the 80s. Like we have some much older things scattered around, hinting at, maybe they've been around a while. And I love that. So maybe they're a couple hundred years old. It's fine, but they're stuck in the bodies of teenage boys and they act like teenage boys.
Yeah.
And I think that for a horror movie, that is the most terrifying thing. Can you imagine being stuck as a teenager forever?
Oh, I mean, it's like the Interview with the Vampire problem with Claudia. Like, can you imagine being a
Yeah.
child? I mean, yeah, it would be horrible. It would be
Okay,
horrible.
but
Oh,
But would it be
one
worse
thing,
to be the head vampire dressed in that horrible 80s suit? I mean,
look, a lot of men, to be honest, are stuck as teenagers their entire lives. So let's set that as this is why this is so horrifying because it's so accurate. Just putting that out there.
the thing I like about this film too is it doesn't leave out the parents. Because actually, the
yes.
big twist in this film, if you've seen this movie, involves the mom. And I think that's a really, and this is not the first 80s horror film that does that, because there's another one on our list that does the same, where like the mom becomes an integral, like, twisting moment towards the end where you have the big reveal. And I liked that, didn't like forget about her. And of course, I love the kooky grandpa who's in his
He's
house.
so
And
fun.
I mean, they just had so many interesting characters, and they fit them all into this single film, and somehow made it work.
So many
So many
characters.
people.
But such a good vampire lore too. I mean, if you like vampire movies, the vampire lore in this movie doesn't disappoint, because it takes things from what everybody believes to be the original vampire lore, like with the stakes of the heart, but then it makes changes, like the way that they'd perish if you stake them isn't the same. It's different for each vampire. The ghouling of people before they become vampires, dogs being like their guards. So I really appreciated that they took both from Peter Pan, but also
Yes.
from like actual vampire lore, but then made it work for their story. Yeah, it's cool.
I love it.
This is a good movie. Great soundtrack. It's a great
Oh my
soundtrack.
goodness, the soundtrack's amazing.
It's the 80s. Of course it's amazing.
Actually, a lot of the soundtracks on these movies are actually really good. Like,
It's true.
Horror movies from this time period did not disappoint in the sound department. Like, the music went all out.
They did. They did. The music in this,
Like,
the costumes in this, the special effects in this also, they did some really fun scenes. And
the bridge scene was
the
cool.
bridge scene was cool. All the wild scenes they do in the house where like things are flying around and lights are here, like that's fascinating. Like I was
Yeah.
rewatching one of those scenes, I think a week ago I watched it. And I was trying to rewatch it last night because I just love it. But this is fantastic. I love this. It definitely has a little bit of psychology and getting into Michael's head quite a bit. Like, are you crazy? Or what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fun. Not for Michael at the time, obviously, but for us as viewers watching the movie.
But the other thing too that's interesting about Lost Boys is I think of the list that we've curated here, it's one of the few that actually has a quote unquote happy ending. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of happy ending. I mean, I think like
Yeah.
a lot of the films on this list, a lot of 80s films, like kind of end on a dark note, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And this one has like kind of a romantic vibe to it that has a, I would say, satisfying ending at the end.
I do like
It doesn't leave you thinking, oh gosh, everybody's a vampire or whatever,
Yeah.
I still love this. Oh, sorry.
It is.
It really is. Can I say one other thing? I had forgotten that Joe Schumacher directed this movie. Like, Joe Schumacher is not my favorite director by any means because of what he did with the Batman franchise when he had access to it. And I've got to say, like, this highlights why he was given that, because this was a great, like, amazingly directed movie.
Yeah.
It was well done.
Where was that Joel Schumacher years later? Anyway, sorry. Just put my hate out there.
But if we're talking about packing a lot into a short movie, this is only a little over 90 minutes also.
Mhm.
Like it's
But this one to me
really
feels longer.
short.
Maybe it's because of the
It
music.
does. It
It does feel like
feels
a longer film.
longer. But it's only like 90, I think it's like 98 minutes. It's not that long, but it's iconic.
You know what?
It's
You know what I think makes the difference between like The Fly and The Lost Boys in those shorter 80s horror films versus today is today they would try to fit so much gore in for no reason. And that's one of my pet peeves is like, look, gore has a place in horror, but it should not be the only thing in horror.
Mhm.
And I kind of feel like we've kind of jumped the shark in a lot of modern horror movies because it's just gore and there's no psychological aspect to the whole horror aspect, which I think is what makes the 80s horror movies, for the most part, pretty amazing.
There's actually a really good Stephen King quote that relates to that because somebody asked him about his books like once, like what he tries to do when he writes his books, and he says that the first thing he tries to do is like terrify his readers. And if he can't terrify them, he tries to horrify them. And if he can't horrify them, his very last resort is to gross them out. And I think that the 80s horror films took that into like I think that's what they were trying to do as well.
yeah.
One exception on this list when we get to it, where I might say that grossing people out was the first goal, but we'll get to it.
We'll get to it. No, I know which one you're talking about, and yeah, no, you're
Or
right.
maybe I just shouldn't watch films at 6:00 in the morning.
Also,
while I'm trying to eat
probably
breakfast.
horror movies over breakfast is not the best time. But, you know.
Yes. I mean, there was one I wanted to watch, but instead I had the experience at a haunted hotel. So anyway, moving on.
Are you sure you want to move on? I would like to talk about your horror experience just a little bit.
And
maybe we should not taunt ghosts next time we are at a known haunted location.
We just found out a few minutes ago that Joseph was at a haunted hotel last week. That's where this is coming from.
Yes. And look, I had to make a trip out of town. I was in San Antonio. And, you know, stayed at a hotel without doing some background research into it. My sister, I think, steered me the wrong way. I don't know. She swears it was an accident, a coincidence. I have my doubts. Anyway, basically ended up staying in the third most haunted hotel in America, which I am a man of science. I do not generally subscribe to believing fully in the supernatural. I am reevaluating these thoughts because I could not sleep at all Friday night. The smell of formaldehyde and rotting flesh was overpowering, and it's not like the hotel smelled like that the entire time.
I mean, you should definitely put this on your Yelp review.
I think that will help more people stay there, actually. The hotel would probably really enjoy you putting this in your Yelp review. Put it on your little Google review.
I mean, I think that they look forward to that. It's the Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio, by the way. And this is not an advertisement for them, because if you want a good night's rest, I suggest not staying there. Is all I'm saying. If you want to like walk the hallways looking for ghosts, that's your place. Go there.
Okay, but in fairness to the hotel, maybe you would have slept better if you hadn't had, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't talk shit about ghosts and then expect to sleep.
If I had
feel like that
maybe we shouldn't be. Don't taunt the haunt.
Okay, look.
I put on a t-shirt for you.
I did everything wrong. Okay.
Yes.
I walked into that hotel, and much like an 80s horror flick, I immediately did all the things I should not have done instead of respecting the spirits and asking for them to, or wishing for them to have peace. And nope, I was just my typical scientifically arrogant self. about things, and I paid for it. So there we
So
go.
the lesson to be learned from this is don't taunt the haunt. You
The
know?
lesson. Are we done with the Lost Boys? First.
Yeah,
We are.
no,
Let's move on to the next
we're
one.
off topic completely. Yes, we can
Okay,
move on.
okay. The reason I ask is because the lesson that I had is do not stay at a haunted hotel, which
Yeah.
The Shining.
So we transitioned beautifully into this one. I will have to say I rewatched this because I remembered that I hated it, and I couldn't remember, like, I remembered small bits because this is an iconic film that people talk about and reference all the time. But I was like, I don't feel like I remember enough about this. So I rewatched it. And yes, I still hate it. I still do not like it. Part of it is I don't like children in horror. We discussed this before we started recording. There are multiple reasons I don't like kids in horror. One is uh I don't really like kids in any movie that they can't watch. I just don't like it. Like, there should be a lot more done surrounding kids in Hollywood. I don't like it.
Okay,
Kids
so
are creepy enough. Kids are creepy enough. We don't need, it's too realistic.
Kids are creepy.
It's too
Kids
realistic.
are creepy.
Okay.
I'm gonna say this. I do agree that kids in horror movies freak me out, but I don't. I do and I don't hate The Shining, and I'm going to set some expectations here, right? So there was a remake of this. It was like a made for TV or like a mini series done in the 90s
remember
with
that one.
Steven Weber.
Yeah.
Which I cannot find, by
Yeah.
the way. And that was the best version of The Shining I have seen. I love that version so much better than the 80s version.
I would say it's the best. It's the best book to screen adaptation
Okay.
of The Shining. I don't know that I would call it the best Shining movie, but it's totally different. I mean, it's definitely more faithful to the book than Kubrick's version. But I just didn't scare me. It didn't scare me.
So the
Kubrick's
80s
version scared me.
The 80s version did scare me, right? And Kubrick did a very good job in making a horror movie for the audience. But what the thing that I hate about The Shining is what Kubrick had to do to make this movie, which is basically torment Shelley Duvall and destroy her career. Like that is one reason why I cannot stand Stanley Kubrick, and I have a problem with this version of the movie. Now, was it a good horror? It was a well done horror flick, but knowing the backstory behind it makes me hate the movie. Like it sucks.
Yeah,
and I think he could have done
can
this
give you
without
that.
it.
That is a problem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
I think
didn't
you're
have
right.
to do
He could
that.
have. That was problematic. And it also, for me, actually, I had a problem with this movie for many years because Stephen King had a problem with this movie. Like he hated it for years. And like as an author myself, I understand why he hated it. Like if it had been my book, I probably would have hated it as well. But everything else aside, Kubrick being crazy aside, I think it's a horror film. It stands very well on its own.
Yes.
Away from
think
the source
it
material.
is horrific. I think you get the you're in an isolation scenario. We have a couple other movies on our list that have that isolation location. You're trapped. But there are so many things in this movie that I'm just like, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. I can't like it. And I'm sorry. And knowing that Shelley was just traumatized because of this movie, when we know that Shelley is just an extraordinary actress, he didn't need to do that. He wanted to do that. And I feel like a lot of times directors get a little bit too much power and control, and they like to abuse it. And this is one of the ways that they abuse it, because they're like, I have this power, and it's gross and it's creepy. And she has so much talent. you didn't
She
need
was such a
to
good
traumatize
actress.
her.
No,
She's amazing.
no, the traumatizing of her, honestly, and I don't remember, but I think Jack Nicholson was like not standing up for her in this either, right? Like, so that's a
Mm-mm.
whole
I
other,
think that's true. I think he was kind of involved in it.
yeah, and that's a whole like,
Yeah.
look, Jack Nicholson has talent, but I do not like the man, and I'm gonna throw that out there. Um, Mainly, I don't like him because when the Rockets would play the Lakers in the 90s, he was always out there acting like a fool and screaming and being a jerk. And so I was like, "What?"
With his sunglasses on.
Yeah. And so, like, the substance of the man when he's just rooting for his team is to be a complete asshole. So
Yeah.
I was like, that kind of shows that Jack Nicholson's just kind of an asshole. And then, like, knowing the backstory behind The Shining, I'm like, there's reasons I don't like this movie. But I do disagree with you, Van, in that it is actually a really well done horror flick.
I
And it has one of the best horror soundtracks
It's got a
ever
great
made.
soundtrack. I like it visually. I think the set design was phenomenal. Um, but there are parts in it, and we can go ahead and blame Mr. Kubrick
Mhm.
for whatever for the choices. Um, if we were going to remake it today, they would change so many aspects of it, or
Yeah,
the audience would roast them. So there are a lot of insensitive moments,
yes,
um, that I think we all know what we're talking about, that would not fly, and I think even in the '80s, they were not acceptable. Um, but I think the part that just at the so first off, Jack is, like, an amazing example of a narcissist. Um, and he's awful, and I actually, after rewatching this, dropped in our little group chat that we needed to write a disclaimer for this episode, like a
right.
trigger warning, um,
Mhm.
because he's very triggering for me.
He
And I'm
is.
like,
Yeah.
I don't need kids in horror. I have kids. They do creepy, weird stuff. I don't need to see it on screen. Um, I know enough narcissists. I don't need to watch one be awful. Like, and then on top of that, to know that Shelley was actually being tormented. Um, I I'm not sure I can get over that. But then we really only get the three characters, Jack, Wendy, and Danny. But the end is
The end
Danny
is the
and
worst.
Wendy getting away. Um, but only because the old wise black man comes and dies, and they take his
Yeah.
ride back.
The
Which,
ending of
And
this
I hate
movie
that.
is my biggest problem. My biggest
yeah,
problem with this whole film is the ending, because the ending, reg- regardless of whether you've read the book or not, the ending makes no sense. The ending doesn't make sense, and they do this do ex machina at the end uh, by having Scatman's character show up and just yeah, taking the brunt of everything. But yeah, the ending never made sense to me. The photo on the wall, that never made sense. Didn't harken back to anything.
It
Yeah, that was my biggest. That's always been my biggest problem with this movie. Is the
I
end.
the
I
end.
will say that for many reasons, yeah, I get it, and I don't love this movie because of those reasons. I think it's just like this, like nostalgia. And look, when I was growing up, I only ever saw the edited versions of this movie, so I missed a lot of like the really horrific sides of it. Rewatching the full thing, it's like, yeah, okay, I can see that. And you're right. I don't need to see a narcissist on film because hey, there's plenty of real life examples.
We got those all over. It's fine. We don't need
Some of
that.
some of
This
them
is
speak
like
political office.
2.5 hours long, though.
It is
too
long.
It's
very
so
long.
long. So long.
And it's not true to the source material, which is another huge thing that I have. And
Because
that's a huge problem.
the book is wild. But the book it's huge. It's beefy. I have to say I think that Jack played Jack from very well. I think he was very compatible to the book version. Especially when they had those flashback scenes of, well, we don't really get a good picture of what happened to Danny when he was a little kid from the film, but I think they really did take from the book is definitely more graphic in that respect, because you do find out what Jack had done to his son to start this whole thing going. But yeah, there was a lot that they didn't take from the book.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we moving on? Because
I mean, I could talk shit longer, but I would like to hear Marty talk shit about the next movie so I can
What's
defend
next?
how much I love it. American Werewolf in London.
No.
It's so good. It's so good. It is in your head. It is weird. It is like, what is going on? You are like the first time watching it, you are definitely like, which part is real? Which part is not real? Like, what is happening here?
Look, I was a victim of this film. I was a victim of being I was a teenager. No, I was a teenager who was really into these kinds of films, and my best friend was like, "We're gonna watch American Werewolf in London." I'm thinking it's gonna be a great werewolf movie. She's like, "It's so good. If you like Silver Bullet, you're gonna love this." No,
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 it's nothing like Silver Bullet.
It's for me, for a horror film. Like I'm not like I struggle with a lot of modern horror that's too gory. Like I won't watch the Saw stuff. It's just that to me that the story is not really, it's not interesting. This is the opposite side. It's too campy.
I love campy. That's my
it's too
favorite.
evil.
Amazing.
And it's like it's on the edge, and I don't movie. No. I should make a Twilight
I'm sorry,
reference, but
it
I'm
was
not going
not
to.
the real werewolf movie that you wanted. But camp is exactly what I am here for in horror. So I was happy.
But I do appreciate that the 80s had so many different types of horror films. I mean, like look at the ones we've already talked about. They're four different subgenres of horror right there. And this is definitely a campy horror films from the 80s was definitely a thing. So
And
I'll
I
give them
love
that.
them.
But like as a film, I just can't. I just can't.
You can't.
Okay. So
I still love it.
And I'm gonna bring this up because it's not on the list. It's not a horror movie, right? But it's a campy 80s movie, Big Trouble in Little China. Complete camp.
Yeah.
Everything about that movie is camp, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time. And look, American Werewolf in London is definitely not a great movie. It's not my favorite, but I love the campiness of it. Right? I love the movie.
I guess I was just more of a Teen Wolf fan.
You went
I wanted
into
to
it
see
wanting
more Michael
Marty,
J. Fox.
I'm shocked.
You wanted a different werewolf film, and you're judging it unfairly.
I know. And honestly, you can't listen to a word I say about it, because that was the only time I watched it. And this whole week I thought to myself, I should rewatch this. I should rewatch it. I haven't seen it since I was 17. I should rewatch it. And I couldn't find it. So I couldn't find a copy of it.
That is disappointing.
Maybe we'll have to revisit this as a side episode.
I think so when watching horror movies, we're constantly like yelling at the characters, or at least I am. Like, why are you doing that's stupid. Don't do that. And in the beginning of this movie, I am definitely doing that. You get two little teenage babies backpacking in England. Like they're running around. That's fine, whatever. But I'm like, they make so many choices, and I'm like, really? Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Yeah, I definitely shout at the little teenagers, but they're teenagers. Like, teenagers are stupid. I'm sorry to any teenagers who might be listening to this. You're an idiot. And I'm sorry. Hopefully your brain continues to grow and you grow out of it. I'm hopeful for you.
And hopefully you grow out of these movies.
Or you grow up and you mock ghosts and then stay at a haunted hotel. I'm just saying.
That's on you. That's on you. But I do love it. Again, we have a much shorter, like a much smaller cast, a much shorter movie. And there are some bits in it that I'm like, this is not realistic. This is just really over the top ridiculous and campy. And you know what? I love it. And I love in the werewolf scene in the very beginning of the film that we don't really get to see what's happening.
Yeah.
I complain about movies
It would have
and
cost
shows
too much
today.
to show what happens.
Well, yes, that too. But I complain about movies and shows today being too dark, and I'm like, I want to see what's happening. This is a circumstance where I love it because it adds to the horror. It adds to the confusion for the viewer. I'm sure it was cheaper for them. But then at the very end of the film, when we do get to see the werewolf running around London, it gets more of a shock value because we don't have a lot of the werewolf from earlier. Like we didn't really see it. So I really love that. I think it's
I just have to
fantastic.
say, I think in general, I don't think there has, in my opinion, I don't think there has ever really been a very good werewolf horror film. I think all the werewolf films feel like just kind of subpar to the vampire films, for example. And I don't know if it's because people just can't figure out what to do with werewolves, but like when I think about like what are the werewolf movies that are good, like I'm even stretching to say that the ones that are good. So the fact that I don't like this movie should be no surprise.
What's a good one to you? Is my question. Like, what do you think is a good werewolf movie?
I mean, are any of them good? I mean, I think Underworld, but it's more of a vampire movie. But I have to say, I like their werewolves.
Yeah,
I thought Ginger Snaps was interesting. But we're far from the 80s, you know. The Marvel one shot
Werewolf by Night
was a good werewolf film.
I love that movie.
It was great. That's probably the best one I've seen, and it's a Marvel movie, which is
So
wild.
I asked you this because I was going to judge you if you didn't say that. So we're
Okay.
good. We're good.
Phew, I'm
We're
good.
We
Safe.
can move on. So I don't completely hate your answer. So there we go.
And I only say Underworld because I think they did something interesting with werewolves.
I think they did too. I think that is a very interesting franchise.
Because it's hard to make werewolves interesting. I don't know. They're werewolves.
I think werewolves are so interesting, though.
Chocolate.
That's
Was that a werewolf movie? That was a werewolf movie.
I feel like
Do you remember that one? It was based on a book.
which one?
Like
Johnny Depp?
Was it? No, that was the other
Dracula?
one. Something with chocolate, blood and chocolate. That's what it was
Yeah,
called.
that's very
Blood and
I
chocolate.
was like, what are you talking about?
That's the werewolf one.
Remember
Not
that one.
chocolate. That's
No.
a Johnny Depp movie. That might have been a little bit better if he was a werewolf, but
That-
also based on
You know what? That might have been better.
could have been interesting.
That could have been
Would
good.
have been
I think
interesting.
my favorite depiction of a werewolf, as far as I think this is really good and really well done, is not even I'm struggling to actually remember the name of the show.
Oh, there was Bitten. Bitten was was a decent werewolf TV show.
How about
I
the
will give
Wolfman?
that one.
Wasn't the
I'll give
Wolfman-
that one a point. The original, like the old
No,
Wolfman,
no,
the old
the remake.
from like the 30s.
The remake in 20.
I don't remember.
Okay. Being Human UK, not the US one. But
Oh,
Being Human, the
yes.
show, UK, where you
Being
have the
Human,
vampire,
okay.
the ghost, and the
Okay.
werewolf.
Yeah.
The
I
UK
did like
one
that
was
version
better than the US one. It
werewolves.
always is.
Yeah, agreed.
But I liked what they did with werewolves a lot in that show. I think they tackled
Yeah, I think when you
werewolves really
TV
well.
show, you have more opportunity to build on the mythology and the lore. But
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of these werewolf movies, It's just kind of like the werewolf is the bad guy. He's biting everybody. I don't know.
Yes.
I do think that werewolves always play
But-
second fiddle to vampires, though. So I think you're right on that.
They do.
Every time it does feel like we have to throw in some
I think it's
vampires.
because people find vampires slightly more romantic than werewolves, which I guess that could be debatable because I don't know.
I mean, we can have that debate sometime, but I'm not sure it's true. uh
Okay. Are we moving on?
We can move on.
It's like
but
dog
I
people
want
versus
I want Marty
people.
to watch this. The practical effects alone of Lewis transforming into the werewolf is just absolutely fascinating and fantastic.
Okay. So, yes, I think that was
I'll give
super
you that. I will give you that.
Yeah. Now, 2 comments that I love in the chat, right? Steven
Okay.
talks about Michael Jackson's Werewolf from the Thriller video. I mean, it's the Thriller video. Iconic. Perfection. Like,
Ooh, they did kind of a little remake of it. If you've watched the kids' movie Sing
have
has
not.
like a haunted short on Netflix where it's like the Thriller music video.
It's just
And
iconic.
so my kids watched it and they were like, yeah,
It
that's
is.
cool. Okay, whatever. And then I made them sit down and watch the music video.
The real one.
Yeah. I was like, this is what it's based on. You have to understand the context. Okay.
I
It's
mean,
good though.
look, just sidebar, right? Thriller video, Vincent Price, everything you need.
Yeah. No.
Like,
I mean,
will
everything
not be
Vincent
taking
Price
questions.
touches, I love.
Exactly. Yes.
Vincent Price.
I forgot about this one. Wolf with Jack
That-
Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer. I'd forgotten about that one. I'd have to rewatch it.
I have not watched it in a while, but it was a good scary movie. But again,
I haven't seen it since the 90s.
the problem with that movie is Jack Nicholson. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
I am on the
there.
hate Jack Nicholson fan. So there you go. But I think it was a good movie.
Speaking of people transforming into wolves, you know what? I'd like to redo my previous statement. What was I just had the name and it left me. My brain left me. Lady Hawk
Oh,
from the 80s. Lady Hawk. We have a guy that transforms into a wolf.
But is
Lady
that a
Hawk.
werewolf movie?
I mean,
no.
he's a werewolf.
He's a man that transforms into a wolf.
Werewolf. I mean, how specific are we getting here?
I feel like there are werewolf movies, and then there are movies where really good-looking people turn into good-looking wolves. You know, I mean, and therein
I'll give you
lies
that. I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
a difference.
Okay. We can move on. It's just Michelle Pfeiffer reminded me because she is also in that movie.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
More animals.
Can I just anyway, let's move on.
Moving on. I hate this movie. I had seen this movie before, and all I could remember is how much I hated this movie. So I would just like to say I hate this movie. And when I rewatched it, I just spent the entire time yelling, Tasha, don't do that at the screen and say this is a really bad holodeck episode.
Okay, and we're done.
No, yeah, I could be done. I hate it.
I struggle with Pet Semetery, but I also struggle with the book. But if you know the story behind the book, I think it kind of makes sense why I don't like the movies. Just felt kind of like I understand that it's all a metaphor for grief.
Yes.
I can't with cats. I love cats. I just can't.
I love that you're drawing
the scene
the
with the-
line
with
at
the
the
t- with the
cat
toddler.
and not like bringing the toddler back.
I mean, I draw the line at the cat first, and then the toddler. This is fuel to the fire there. I think it's wild that this is a cult
It
classic,
is.
both the book and the 80s film. Of this book. I I can't I just oh. I love Stephen King, but even Stephen King never
Yes.
intended to publish this book. Like, it was never on his radar to publish it. He published it to get out of a contract, a bad contract. And, like, I feel like the movie feels like that to me as well.
So I was reading up on it, and he apparently got the idea because they lived
Mhm.
on a road and his kid's cat got ran over, and he was just thinking, what if we brought the cat back? And that's where this story came from. I hate this movie so much. First off, we don't need kids to be creepy. We don't need it. Toddlers are creepy on their own. They do not need help. I don't
Second
need
that.
them in films. I don't need it. I don't want it. I don't need it. And then
Joseph,
we have a
thoughts?
stupid man who
This is the Van show.
doesn't yeah. This is Van saying how much she hates things.
Look,
You know, it's a hard one for me to watch because on the one hand, it hits a lot of things for me that are hard. Like the grief, loss of a pet, loss of family members. I mean, that stuff already hits hard. And then but the way to see it depicted the way it's depicted on the screen like this, I think the idea is fantastic. I think this idea of this creepy cemetery beyond a cemetery, I love the idea. I just think it's too much for me. I just can't with
It's
cats. Yeah.
the whole look. I have not rewatched this movie. I refuse to rewatch this movie because it traumatized me in
Yeah.
the 80s. And again, thanks, Mom. I don't love anything about this movie. Stephen King, look, I think is a fantastic author, but sometimes the stuff just doesn't hit for me. And this is one of those times where I'm just like, I could do without. Like,
I think it's very hard to translate his stuff to film because his stuff is meant to get into you like deep.
psychologically. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to do that with a 90-minute movie or a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that same effect. And it ends up coming off as just
There's so
really
many
gory, really
things.
gross.
There's so
really
many things about
cheesy.
his books that dive into different aspects of your psyche that what makes him such an amazing author, right? And it's like The Stand, right? I hate every version of The Stand that's ever been put onto film. I think it's just like it's either like it just misses the point completely. If you read the
Yeah.
book, amazing book. If you watch the movies, I'm like, what is this garbage that you've put in front of me, and why have you served it? And this is how I feel about most of his like most of the adaptations of his books, right? Except for the
But what I do
one,
like about his adaptations from this time period is that he's in all of them. Like, because he's in this one as the priest.
right.
He like
But
tries to pull a Hitchcock, but he's not an actor.
he's not an actor. Stephen King, keep writing books, keep your political commentary going. Please
Yes.
do not act. I need you to never act again. That's
fair. Now
Van.
I
Your face says it all. We'll just screenshot your
we
face for
just
this
Hold
episode.
on. Wait. Go ahead, Van.
I cannot do it again. I feel like this movie suffered from also not knowing what it was because I feel like it genre hopped a couple times. And there are things in it I would just why did we need Rachel's sister? That bothered me so much. I hated that I don't think we need. Like, I don't think we need to make kids creepy, and I don't think we need to make disabled people just creepy with no other personality. That bothers me so much. The Native American aspects of this film are also very cringy with a modern lens.
They were cringy back then, by the way. I'm just gonna
They
throw that
were.
out
They
there.
were.
Yeah,
They really were.
they were.
It it uh and it went just straight, let's go for gore in the last 20 minutes after not really being a gory movie at all. And then it's just like, no, we're gonna go gore. And I'm just like, why? That was not where we were at all. Why would I don't think that I hate this. Let's talk about something else.
Moving on.
I hate this
Moving on.
movie.
That's
The Thing, 1982.
This is one of my favorite
Which
movies.
is amazing. It's so
I love
good. And we
this
get
movie.
another isolation movie. They are isolated. They are
Isolation in Winter. I like Isolation in Winter.
so, very
Yes.
shining again, isolation surrounded by snow. I'm gonna say I hate this because the puppies die. Yes, I understand that humans die later.
Spoiler.
The puppies
l-
die, okay?
Look,
It's a
I
good dog. They're
I
good
love the
puppies.
puppies. The puppies are amazing. This movie is good though.
I'm not saying the movie is bad.
Alien puppies.
Listen,
Alien
I can
puppies.
hate it and still say it's a good movie, but you just can't hurt the puppies. Listen, I don't watch John Wick because I know that the puppy dies, and I don't care. I don't
And
care.
then you get 4 movies of revenge because of it.
I don't care.
I mean,
The puppy
valid
dies.
reason to go on a 4-movie revenge trip.
No,
though.
he is completely justified. I approve. Yeah, no, I would do the exact same thing. This makes sense.
With a pencil?
This is another big cast like the Lost Boys. We have a huge cast. We have a stacked cast. We have so many amazing actors in this. Uh we have no women in this entire thing. Like not a single one.
I think if we did, we'd get another one of those pregnancy scenes. So I'm glad there were
I
no
feel
women
like
in
we
this
would.
movie.
I feel like we would.
would've
I'm
done
gonna
another, like-
disagree. It's John Carpenter.
Really?
I don't think he would have done it. I don't think he would have done it.
I feel like we
don't?
might get something more
like everybody was
similar
doing that in the
to
80s.
The Predator, where in The Predator we get one singular girl and then she's mostly just tied up and useless and then survives at the end.
So I'm going to defend John Carpenter a little bit here because I feel like, generally speaking, he did not subscribe to just what everybody else was doing in the 80s. He did his own thing, which is why he hates Hollywood, by the way, and why he walked away from like mainstream movies, because they had these like demands of him as a director, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that. And I say this only because like he made a movie in the 80s around Chinese, like Asian culture, where the white guy was the comic relief and the Asian people were the heroes, and got shit for it and walked away from like mainstream Hollywood, basically.
As
So
he should.
as he should have, right? And I just don't think that a lot of the characters in that movie were women and very powerful and very strong. So I don't see him like, I think he would have done it a little different. I'm sad that he didn't put a woman in this movie, to be honest.
I think in the 80s, putting a woman in that location would have just been like really, really weird. Like, why a woman in the ice, trapped for months? I feel like no one was gonna put a woman in this film, and I understand it. It's just like I like movies better with strong female characters. But this movie, we have a huge cast of very, very highly skilled and trained and competent people. And that's not something we always get in horror movies, but we get it in this one, and it is fascinating to see what a group of competent people do in this horrific situation. The Thing is creepy. That is creepy, creeps me out. Don't like it.
I like this one. It was funny because I watched this almost back to back with The Fly. And it was just like I was like kind of overwhelmed by this body horror that was going on. But I think The Thing does it so well, and I just feel like this is such a good, as opposed to Predator, which we'll get to. But I felt like The Thing was such a good blend of horror and sci-fi. I
Yes.
think horror,
Yeah.
sci-fi horror is a very niche genre, and I feel like it's a very hard genre to pull off. You either end up going more science fiction-y and almost making an action film, or you go too horror and the sci-fi element becomes just like the basis for what's happening and not actually part of the story so much. But I think with The Thing, you get a really good even 50-50 of the sci-fi and the horror. And that's something I really love about this movie. I also love the ending because if you've seen The Thing, the ending, it leaves you kind of hanging. You don't really know. It's a situation that could give you a sequel and then you don't get one. And I'm so glad that they just like stop it there.
Yes.
Because it just leaves you with this unsettling, like, well, is he or isn't he situation?
Yes.
It's
the
it's so
ending
well
is
done.
my favorite. It is so good.
Yeah, they share a bottle.
This ending, I
something
feel
very-
like you can't pull off with a lot of films, and I think with The Thing, they set it up so that they could. So you could walk away a pessimist and be like, "Yeah, they're all gonna die. The world's ending," or you could walk away an optimist and be like, "No, they saved us."
Yes.
I
And
mean,
I would
I
like to walk away saying we are saved.
I get the impression. This is me, right? I get the impression walking away from it that they saved everybody, and they know they're going to die because of it, but they did what they had to do to save humanity. So I guess I'm an optimist. That's not really who I am, but I don't know.
I feel like
Yeah,
it's
I'm
not
kind of
even
in the camp of they
optimism,
saved people.
but I have complete faith in the decisions that they made at the end, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, I really
He
like
did
this
it.
movie.
Yeah.
Puppies
It's
aside, I do love
Yeah,
this
the
movie.
Such a
puppies
good
aside, this is an amazing movie. The acting is amazing. Um, the practical effects again are so fantastic. The body gore, the I really love it in a creepy way. Like they pulled off what they were trying to pull off. For me, even watching it now, I'm like, this is good. This is good. I would hate to see
Yeah.
this redone
They
and
didn't go over the top. I
CGI'd.
think they did just enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were
I think if
CGI
it had
this,
been
and I would hate it.
CGI, yeah. Which there was a remake of it, and I saw it when it came out, but I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah.
Except that I like the original better.
It was not relevant.
Yeah, but again,
This
it goes back to like CGI takes away a lot of the soul of a movie, right? And then
I
Mhm.
you can't replicate Kurt
I also have to give
Russell
Yeah.
and John Carpenter. So to finish that point, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter together, like they made great movies together.
They did. And I have to give The Thing props for like inspiring my favorite episode of the X-Files. If you've seen the X-Files, it's an
Yes.
episode early in the first season called Ice, which is very much The Thing, but with Mulder and Scully, it's a perfect episode of TV. It's probably one of the best episodes of that show.
So I kind of feel like all sci-fi franchises have kind of taken, because there's an episode of Enterprise where they're in the ice and
Yeah,
they
you're right.
discovered the Borg, and then there's an episode of Stargate, and in this case it's a virus, but it's when
Mhm.
Jack gets infected by the ancient virus.
Yeah.
And
And then the X-Files, it was a worm, but
Right. But it kind of feels like, and I don't know that it's true, like I haven't looked it up, but it feels like they're always going back and kind of like referencing this movie. And it wouldn't surprise me if that was indeed the case.
I
yeah.
mean, we can
Well, I mean, even
reference
Thing
the
came from something
Blob.
else too.
Like, if we go back and watch the Blob from the 1950s, which we were going to talk about in our last episode, and we
Ooh.
did not get to, which was sad. But at the end of that, we get them picking up the Blob and taking it to the ice.
Mhm.
So like freezing creepy things in ice. It's
It's a common theme.
and it is a good horror basis, because even right now we have kind of that concern, kind of that fear. We have a lot of ice caps melting and things are coming out.
I was going to bring that up.
I love the like bloody like waterfall. I believe it's at the Arctic.
Yeah.
And it's not blood. It looks like blood, but it's just, cool chemicals, and like this is just how things are melting, and creepy. I base a horror movie on that. Yeah, I'll watch it. That would be creepy. So yeah,
That would be scary.
frozen things and ice. Realistic enough that we can all be just a little scared, just a little uncomfy cozy.
Yeah, I think it just harkens back to this fear. I think that's kind of almost an instinctual fear of there being something ancient in these areas that predates humanity that we can't possibly understand, that we could potentially unleash by accident. And I think that's a theme that sci-fi and horror is really good at exploring.
Just viruses and bacteria. So
Yeah,
nothing.
it'll be fine.
It's not like we would have a global pandemic and be completely ill prepared for it,
Right?
or something.
I feel like it is too soon for that joke, Joseph. It might be too soon for that joke. Gotta wait a couple more decades.
I mean, it's not really a joke; it's an actual legit concern. But okay, moving on to something
Moving
that is
on.
more-
Also by John Carpenter, this released the next year. Christine.
And Stephen King.
This is a longer movie than I really think it needed to be. It builds up very, very slowly. I think it's like over 2 hours. It's a long movie.
It is a long film.
But I do like the use of music in it. The use of music is very important in it. And so listening to the actual lyrics and listening to the music in it builds the story. In the first scene where we see Christine being built, we get the song Bad to the Bone. And the lyrics are, this kid was just born bad. And so we don't get any backstory on Christine having some horrific thing happen to her as a car. It is just implied that this car is just born bad.
Evil. Just an evil car.
And immediately starts injuring and killing people before even leaving the factory. Like this car, just bad. This one's bad. Fascinating. Scary concept, but fascinating. And we also have kind of a smaller cast in this one. We do have some side characters. We have the parents. We have the creepy guy that sold him the car. We have like the bullies. But really, we just have 3 teenagers as like our main cast. And I just want to point out one thing, and then I'll let you guys talk for a little bit. But our main character, Arnie, is running around a little nerd in his glasses. He gets kind of in a scuffle in shop class. His glasses get broken. He obviously needs them because he's taped them back together and has put them back on in the next scene. And then as this car corrupts him and turns him kind of evil. He just starts dressing completely differently in lots of black and red and leather and no longer needs glasses. It reminds me
Christine solves
yeah,
all
it
of his
solves
problems.
all of his problems. It reminds me a lot of Batman, where we have Poison Ivy. As a doctor, she had glasses. As Poison Ivy, she apparently gets contacts. Um, uh, there's a couple other Batman villains that do that like have glasses and then turn evil, and then they just don't need glasses
The Riddler,
anymore.
I think.
I think the Riddler, Harley Quinn, as a doctor,
Mhm.
has glasses.
I think for like film's sake, actually, I think he has glasses in the book. Actually, if I remember, I read this book recently, but I think just for filming's sake, it's an easy way of like showing somebody's physical transformation. Give him nerdy
Yeah.
glasses at the beginning, and then suddenly he doesn't need them anymore, and he's buff because he's wearing tighter t-shirts, cooler shoes, and he's combed his hair.
Totally doesn't
Yeah.
work for me, but anyway, glad it works for you.
So I'm just saying.
Joseph would see through Clark Kent in a second.
Actually, what was it? There was a situation the other day. I was talking to somebody about some actor in a series, and I was like, wait, is that? Oh my God. I would actually fall for the whole Clark Kent thing. I can't remember what I was talking about, but no.
No, I
would
get it.
I would share the comment. I like it because the comment is villains don't need glasses. And to be honest, I would like to see more villains with
I
glasses.
would like to see more villains with glasses.
But like in a
Yes.
way that makes them look make them look better than the hero.
Yes.
Like, oh, I would fall for the villain
I
with
would like
glasses.
more movies where we
But Christine-
transform people either from regular people to villains, or like the little nerd in the corner to like the hot bombshell at the end. They always are wearing glasses and they always take the glasses off. And I would like them to just get better frames for their face. Like keep the glasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Just get
Yeah.
better frames that flatter your
Get
face.
sexier frames.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get sexy glasses. That's what we all want.
Yeah.
I somebody call up Hollywood.
I
need
think
a-
with Christine, though, like, first of all, props to Stephen King for having this fascination with evil cars. He's got like 3 or 4 books that are about evil cars. Christine, I think, is probably one of the better ones. It's definitely most memorable. But I just like this, this is another genre of horror we haven't really talked about, where like it's just an evil entity, like an evil thing.
Right. An
There's no
inanimate
reason why
object
it's
is-
evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. That then affects somebody to the point of madness, or to the point of them becoming evil themselves, bringing out the bad in people. I feel like this was like a prelude to the Needful Things type storylines that he did, where people would find objects that would inspire like these obsessive qualities in them.
Yeah.
But I mean, the idea of an evil car and being passed down to every owner, I think, I mean, it's funny, but like, it worked. I think
did.
as a film, I think it worked. It was a little bit long, but I think as a film, it worked.
It worked really well, I think, as a film. Again, long. And I love that it's really centered around 3 teenagers. And 2 teenagers are the ones that are like, we're gonna put a stop to this. And they do. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you smart little teenagers. I'm so proud of you. This was not the best way to handle the situation, but it worked out in the end. So good job.
I think it's interesting that we see. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that we see a lot of horror movies with teenagers, because teenagers are also going through a transformative time in their lives, and then they come across some evil car that's also pushes that transformative time into a different direction, or with a Carrie, for example, her hormonal changes make her into this entity with abilities that as a teenager she's not properly equipped to handle. And
Look,
yeah, we have a few other
Christine-
films that have teenagers.
Christine bothers me for one reason and one reason only. You're
Oh.
destroying a classic car. That will never
It's
fly
okay.
well
It's
with
okay.
me.
She fixes herself. It's fine. It's fine.
They only
She
imply
fixes
that
herself.
though.
Christine.
Okay, so we should save the classic car and just how many
Save the evil
people
car.
does she get to kill a year? And it's okay. It's worth saving the classic car. Tell us, Joseph, how many people are okay?
Can we target who the car?
No, you don't get.
I know. I was just going to say something, but I didn't want to bring on a
Joseph,
certain group of people.
completely random.
A certain group of people that buy a certain type of car need to borrow Christine, and then
Okay, but
Are we
building
talking
off
about
that,
the Cybertruck? Sorry.
building off that, I would like a modern Christine remake, but it is a Cybertruck. It was just born bad. And it is the only Cybertruck
Nobody is
that
going to
instead of
spend-
falling apart,
What is-
it fixes itself.
Oh no, but you can get one used.
But what does he spend like $200 for Christine? Nobody is going to buy a Cybertruck for $200. Evil or not.
Marty? They're just
What?
like at some point they're just going to give away these horrible things that have died on the side of the road because it rained.
Look,
and it could no longer function because it rained. Great truck, by the way.
a creepy old guy comes up to me and he's like, "You can have Christine, or you can have the Cybertruck." Like,
I would
no,
take
I'm
Christine.
gonna go with Christine, even if it's gonna make me evil. Because at least I'm not evil ahead of time. Christine makes me evil. I feel like I would only
Right.
I would only buy the Cybertruck if I were already evil. It's not gonna make me any more
Pick
interesting.
Christine
Pick Christine.
for the taste value alone. Like I'm stylish. I have good taste.
Correct. There's aesthetics to keep in mind, and I would never be caught dead in a Cybertruck.
Well,
I
you
mean,
would be caught dead.
Just
in
like
the
I would
Cybertruck
never be
if
caught
it was
dead
evil.
living in
We-
a really
We need to
ugly
move on
dumpster.
before they find us.
I don't care if they find
Yeah.
us. I'd love to block them.
Completely off topic. But the fly that was buzzing around earlier when we were talking about the fly.
I saw it.
It's
committed
now in my
seppuku?
coffee.
Okay, so
You're
it's
doomed.
a Halloween episode. Are
You're
you going to
doomed.
drink that coffee or not? I'm curious.
There's a
Have-
fly in my coffee.
you been
I'm
possessed?
about
No,
ready to
look,
walk away from you guys
we
and
didn't
make
talk
more coffee,
about-
but I'm not going to drink the fly coffee.
We
Just
didn't talk
curious.
about his like vomiting scenes, and
Oh,
so that alone makes you not drink the coffee. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so moving
He had
on.
so many.
no.
Moving on to one of my favorites. I think one of my favorites is next.
Okay, but
Yes.
no coffee.
Yes. This is like one of
we're
the
back
best
to teenagers
horror franchises.
and nobody
ever.
believing the teenager.
I love this movie. I love all the Nightmare movies.
It's
But
a
the
really
first
good franchise. It's
It's
a really
so
good
good.
franchise.
It's so good.
Um,
It's a franchise where like it starts to dip a little bit around like the third one, and it
As they
picks
do.
back up. I feel like it picks back up.
it
but I
redeems
think
itself.
Freddy is such a good horror villain.
I feel like if Nancy's dad had taken her more seriously, this would have been a less interesting movie.
I don't know. If
Oh,
Nancy-
absolutely.
I
feel
saw the
like
extra protein. The fly would be extra protein. I'm not doing it.
the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, the Halloween franchise, and the Friday the 13th franchise, and the
Yes.
Scream franchise later to some extent, they only work because nobody is listening to the teenagers, because
Yeah.
nobody's helping them. They're on their own. That's why they work.
Yes.
Once the parent like takes them seriously, you know,
It's over.
then what? Like, it's over.
But that is also very realistic. Teenagers are so dramatic. Sometimes you really just want to tune out their nonsense. So I can understand. And they're dramatic all the time. Everything that happens to
Yeah.
them because of their brain chemistry, because of the changes that are occurring during puberty, during your teenage years, everything to you is the most important thing in the world.
Okay.
Everything is vital.
I mean, when
Everything
Johnny
is
Depp is your
huge.
boyfriend, everything is the
Oh,
most
you know
important.
what?
Okay.
You got
But
me there.
but also, there's something haunting your dreams and you can't sleep at night. I'm just going to point out that happened to me right now. I
Yeah,
would be really dramatic.
Fair.
It happens
I would be
like I
too.
couldn't sleep Friday
'Cause,
night,
you know,
and I was dramatic about it. So I'm just saying.
This is true.
I mean, how grumpy do you get when you can't sleep? Like, and at what point do you actually start having hysteria, where you start actually hallucinating because you don't know, because you haven't slept enough?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the great things about this series.
For me, it's about 9 days without REM sleep. I start hallucinating.
Let me just have a sip
Yes,
of my
I know
coffee.
this. Yes, I know this.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
I mean,
it has
I know I
occurred
go
more
into
than
like REM
once.
sleep like 6 or 7 times a night, so like I would lose my mind within like a day. I would be the
I
worst. Like Freddie would get me so fast because like I cannot go without sleep.
I
I would be gone. I'd be like, Freddie, I'll
I
just
feel
join
like
up. Just
parents
take me now.
would be slightly better at this because you survive when kids are little with very little REM sleep for an extended period of time, depending on your kid. Um,
this is why I have
and
no
then
children.
you don't really stop doing that as they get older because it never fails. They get sick overnight. And then I think I was complaining a couple months ago that I woke up to my kid crawling in bed and just like puking right next to my head. Um, Kids,
Thank you for
see, Marty,
confirming my
I
life
love that
choices.
face. We
Thank
should
you for
flip out that
confirming my
face.
life choices.
Marty,
I don't.
Marty,
Who needs to watch
Are-
The Fly and Alien? Just listen to Van stories.
look, Van. I love your children. They
They're
are
amazing.
sweet and amazing,
They're
and
so
I
good.
love that I have been able to
I
interact
just
with
don't love
them
vomit.
and then walk away and never have to worry about them puking on my bed. I am also going to say that I absolutely love the fact that I have never had to worry about that and will never have to worry
I
about
mean, my
that.
cats have puked on me on my bed before, but like, I just fall back asleep at that point because what am I gonna do?
No,
Look, the coolest thing about A Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm gonna circle back
please.
here. I mean, I don't think there was vomit in the first one,
I don't remember.
but I love this like blend of reality in the dream world and not necessarily knowing what is real and what isn't, because we think we've all had those dreams where we thought it was actually happening, where we thought it was real, and then suddenly we wake up and we're like completely disoriented because we thought we were actually doing something and it ended up being a dream.
Yes. We've
If
all
anybody's
been
ever
there.
had those dream within a dream moments where you wake up and then you find out that you waking up was also part of the dream.
Oh, I hate that.
Like,
I don't like
just-
that.
I hate that. But I think that it's such a perfect place to start storytelling. And also that bathtub scene in the first film. The bathtub scene is one of the creepiest. And I'd love to know if it's creepy for guys as well. But to me, I feel like it is one of the creepiest scenes in any horror film ever, where she's just in the bathtub and she's starting to fall asleep, and her mom is like knocking on the bathroom door, telling her not to fall asleep. And like his hand comes up, and you just see the claws coming out of like the bubble bath. I'm like,
What is it with horror movies and bathtubs and showers? Like, can I
Okay,
just get clean in peace?
It's because
Water
that's where you're
is
you're
scary.
like you're at your most vulnerable, right? Because you're wet, you're slippery, you're naked,
You're naked.
and like you're doing something that's like a cleansing ritual, and that's just violating. And yes, that is horrifying for me too, Marty. By the way, I don't know if I
Okay,
can speak
because
for all
it's a
men,
scary
but
scene, and that is like a scene that like has never left me since I first saw that film. Like it's a scene I always prepare myself for. I'm like, okay, this is the bathtub scene. It's still. I watched it yesterday. I rewatched it yesterday. It still freaks me out.
I did not rewatch it yesterday or to prepare for this at all because I was like, I don't really want
But
to.
Another horror movie where the ending is insane.
Yes,
Like a double twist ending.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that's so bold. I feel like if you did an ending like that today, the critics might tear you apart.
Yeah.
It's a hit or miss. But I feel like with this film, maybe because there weren't many films that had done that before, maybe it was even the first. I'm not sure. But that ending really
I like the end.
it's creepy. It leaves you on a scary note because you're like, oh gosh, the whole time you thought that she was out of the dream, she's still in the dream.
It's a good ending. It's a good ending. So we get a lot of horror franchises. And my favorite big horror franchise is actually Scream, which didn't come out until the 90s, but really it was the 70s and 80s where we started these big horror franchises. And we touched on Halloween and Friday the 13th also, but Alien starts in the 70s. Halloween starts in the 70s. Predator, huge franchise now, starting in the 80s. We're talking about it in a minute. So we know
Hellraiser. I did not realize how many Hellraiser movies there were. There's
so
like 15.
many. That was my reaction when we were talking about the Alien franchise a couple podcasts ago. I was like, yeah, I've seen all of the Aliens. Nope.
No, you haven't.
No, I haven't.
Half. You've seen half.
No, I have not. I did not realize how many were out there. But yeah, I have not seen all of the Hellraisers either.
Yeah.
Because it's not one of my favorites.
No.
I've seen half of one, by the way. So
I'm very proud of you.
Well, we'll get to it because we're talking about Hellraiser later.
All right.
And
next up, though, we have Friday the 13th.
Yes, we do.
Which is an amazing franchise.
The first one, I love it just because I love Kevin Bacon, and I will watch anything with Kevin Bacon in it, even if he has a 5-second role, like he does in this one.
That's fair. I
Although
think,
if my sister is watching, she knows I'm the Freddy fan and she's the Jason fan. But
fair.
But what a twist! The first one, because the first one's not a Jason movie, right?
It's not.
No.
It's not, and I love it. But
that's the crazy thing about this franchise.
But we get teenagers in isolation in this one, and we don't get ice. We just get wilderness, which is very relatable
also
for
scary.
me because I kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere and lived in the middle of nowhere and have done camping and hiking, etc. I don't do a lot of hanging out in the snow because I don't like it. So this Friday the 13th is just a little creepier for me, having done a lot of like Boy Scout and Girl Scout camp growing up.
Yeah, I think it was really relatable to teens in the 80s and in the 90s too. I'm not really sure how relatable it is to teens nowadays because like we were all being shipped off to summer camps and stuff when we were kids.
Oh, it still happens. They still
are they? Are they still going?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Kids are still getting shipped off.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Kids still going to Camp Crystal Lake.
That will never die. That will never die.
Tell Jason I say hi.
Yes. I love this one because it isn't Jason in the first one. It's his mother. And
it's brilliant.
So much of this is clearly about her grief and her own guilt because she feels like it is her fault that her kid was in this position and died, even though she is spending the entire movie like saying that she's blaming other people. It's very clearly about her own guilt, and that's so relatable as a parent. Like you are going to feel guilty about something that you did, and she made a choice. She's like, I have a job trying to take care of my kid, and just that happened to turn out very, very poorly. It's not even that she made a terrible, horrible decision, like living next to insane road with trucks driving down it, like in Pet Semetery. Like, I would have moved. Move.
Right?
Not let your kids play anywhere near the road. Put up a fence. Like, we have options here. But she didn't really make a horrible, terrible parenting decision. She was just parenting, doing a normal parenting thing, having a job, having her kid at summer camp. And I love it. I love it. You get a lot. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was gonna say something else I love about this one, which I think, I feel like this kind of started with Halloween and Nightmare, and then, the in films is the final girl. And I feel like if you're a thriller fan nowadays, the final girl is making a comeback in literature. Like, final girls are back. Like, not in the horror genre though, but in the thriller genre. And something that's really interesting about this first Friday the 13th film is that, like, yeah, it's a horror film because of the way everybody dies, but if you just look at the story itself, it's a thriller, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting that they basically took a thriller story and then made it horror via the gore and the murders. The rest of the series is definitely horror.
Yes.
Once Jason comes into it, but this first one is definitely it falls very on the edge of the thriller genre, and I just think it's cool that this is where we got like these final girls, and I like seeing that it's coming back.
Yes, I love the final girl.
At the end of this movie, is it the dream that she has of Jason dragging her underwater, or is that actually something that she survives? Like, I was never clear on that, and I did not rewatch this. So, like, do we know? Because there's like a slight bit of horror at the end.
Yeah, I always felt at the end kind of pushed it into the supernatural. I always thought the end that maybe it was real, because then it sets up all the other movies. Otherwise, all the other movies are just
Ridiculous.
restarted and ignore the first one. I'm not sure. I always thought it was real. I thought that was like the main horror element, was that supernatural ending.
Yeah, I thought so. But...
I always thought it was a dream, but it was a dream that left the opening that it was real enough that he comes back later. Like, this was his first little toe dip into coming and being supernatural and causing problems.
And brings him back into the real world.
So fantastic. I love this franchise. It's fun.
I think somebody should do their PhD thesis on that, actually, because that would be quite interesting.
I'm pretty sure some have been done.
Somebody
Probably.
has done this. They should send it to us, please. Another Frackin' Podcast. We have a Gmail account. What is it? Another Frackin' Podcast at gmail.com. Yeah, easy peasy. Our next one, I have a lot of thoughts on, so I'd like to move on so we can not.
Oh my gosh, the thoughts.
Hours.
Oh, the thoughts.
First off, I'm like the kid in the family that gets the little puzzle boxes and the little like 3D puzzles for Christmas. People like buying.
Well, we need to tell people we're talking about Hellraiser.
Yeah. I figured that was obvious with the puzzle box. But yeah, Hellraiser. So for me, this is a little creepy, like solving a fun little puzzle, and you open up a portal to these very sweet
to hell,
like wonderful. I hate these guys. I hate them. This is way more gore than I personally can handle.
Yeah. I was telling you guys before the podcast started, I had completely convinced myself that I had seen Hellraiser. I'd convinced myself that I'd seen the first Hellraiser and none of the other ones. Purely on the fact that Andrew J. Robinson is in it. I convinced myself I must have seen it. I watched it this morning at 6:00 in the morning because I woke up super early because we had a time change and I couldn't fall back to sleep. I'm like, I'm going to watch Hellraiser. I had never seen that movie before. And now I know why I had never seen it before, because a lot of these movies we've talked about, I was able to sneak the copy from Blockbuster, the VHS, home to my house, and my mom didn't say anything. I never would have gotten away with pulling Hellraiser off the shelves. And in my mind, I thought Pinhead was like literally like was the whole movie because he's so scary and he's on the cover and he's literally in it for 2 minutes and says 2 sentences.
Yes.
I was flabbergasted. I'm lying in bed this morning watching it like, what am I watching? And also, I feel like this is like the overtones of sexuality and gore in this film,
Yes.
like the sadomasochism in this film was so intense. You can't even put it on the same level as these other horror movies because, like, I think as a teen, you can watch Friday the 13th, you can watch Nightmare, you can watch Halloween, The Thing, you can watch those movies, and like it's okay. They're okay for teens to watch to an extent. I feel like this movie is like in a completely different category here.
This is
I was
The whole
unprepared.
Like there's this
And I
whole
was
thing
eating
about like
breakfast. My
you don't watch this
Toast
for
Crunch
breakfast.
was like not going down well. I'm sorry.
God.
Like there's a whole place in this where they can't tell if they're angels or demons because they've lost the ability to distinguish between pain and pleasure. It's like this movie is just messed
Yes.
up in so many ways. Like there's
And
deep seated
This
problems
is
here.
sadomasochism. That's the entire film. But which, whatever. But it just gets too gory for me personally.
it is gory. But what I have to say is I'm watching this movie. I'm trying to digest my cereal. I'm struggling. I'm thinking, man, Andrew J. Robinson, like he's also only in like half of the film. He's also kind of barely in the film. But then I'm like, but the lore between the lore about the puzzle box and the lore about the characters in the box, like in this verse or whatever, was really fascinating to me. But it was like not enough. And of course, I'm sure that the other films go into it. But like to me, that was the most interesting part of the film, like the lore of these creatures, these beings that live in this prison type place, and the rest of it was just gross. But I'm kind of interested. And I looked up, I was like, I'm curious now. So I like looked up a little bit of research into it because I was like, why was Pinhead was only in it for like a minute? And I was like, I was afraid of this movie cover box. This VHS box scared me for years as a child, only to find out that he's barely in the movie.
He's not even the scariest
And
one.
he's not the scariest one. That chattering teeth thing is horrifying. But I read that first of all, this movie was cut massively in order to make an R rating, obviously. But they also said that, like, I guess Clive Barker, who like wrote this film, he fought against the production company because they wanted Pinhead to be like Freddy. They wanted him to be like Freddy Krueger, making jokes, being funny. And he was like, this is not a funny character. This is like a Hannibal Lecter character. And that alone makes me curious and makes me kind of want to watch more, but I'm also like, I don't know that I can handle the gore. I'm not sure if I can. But I kind of looked ahead and I realized that the Hellraiser series does the same thing that the Nightmare series does, where it brings the protagonist back in future films. I'm like, oh, that always gets me because I'm always like, oh, it's new people, and then the fourth film, so-and-so returns. And I'm like, oh, I want to know, but also I don't know that I can handle it.
I don't know if that
intense for a Sunday morning, my friends.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I can watch any more of them. It's not my kind of horror.
I understand. But I do appreciate like they've done like they did like the same thing. Like there's like a space version. There's like a version that takes place in like 2040 something or whatever. You know, like the Jason series did. I don't know. I'm curious, but also like I don't know if my stomach could handle it.
It's not my jam.
It's well done. It's well done. The acting is incredible. I did after rewatching it. I was like, I need this nail and lip color combo. Uh,
Oh, okay.
it's
First
so
of all,
good, and it
that
is
that actress, she killed that role. She was kind of scarier to me than the evil creature people, because there was something so off about her from her very first scene. I was like, what is with this woman? I didn't see it coming. I didn't know it was coming. And then like she's the villain of the movie, right? It's not like Pinhead.
It's not.
Like it's not these like evil hell creatures. She's the
No,
bad
it's
guy.
not
And I'm like,
even Frank. Like you think it's Frank?
yeah.
He's the creepy thing who started
I
this
mean,
whole
she's
problem.
inviting people to her house and then killing them so that her ex-lover can come back.
Who is the brother
from
of
the
her
dead.
current husband?
It's
Which is
bizarre.
so bizarre.
It's
And
bizarre.
can we talk about Larry? He's like the sweetest, most wonderful man on the planet, and I
Garrett
love him.
can't cut a break. That's all I'm saying.
He
I
can't.
love him so
He
much.
can't.
He's so
But you know, it's
amazing.
funny because I now it makes more sense to me now why all those interviews with Andy J. Robinson on Star Trek, where he was like afraid to take the role of Garrick because he didn't want to get pinned into another like franchise, because he'd already been in multiple franchises where he was typecast as a certain type of character. Now I get it. I get it a little bit more now after having
Yeah.
seen him in Hellraiser.
Yeah.
That
I
movie was
will
messed
I
up.
will be honest, like this is the one where I've seen half that movie. I can't watch I can't do gore for sake of gore. And while I recognize that there's
Yeah.
good acting in this movie, it was just too much for me.
That's
It's
That's fair.
heavy. It's heavy.
a lot. It's a lot. I struggled with this one. Which is
struggled
really
too.
funny. I can't do gore, but like I don't remember if you guys like in the 90s they used to like show actual like surgeries on humans on like
That's not
cable TV.
But that's not
And
gore.
my dad and I would watch these like actual surgeries of actual like people, and I'm like, this is fine.
Yeah, but
Like
that's
I grew up on
clinical.
a farm.
It's like,
This is fine. Like, but like, fake
So
blood
and I
and
think
guts. No, thank you.
I think Marty and I have talked about this, right? Like I was pre-med.
Yeah.
I've seen cadavers. I've seen gross anatomy labs. Like it doesn't bother me the slightest, right? I think the first time I saw a cadaver and went on a tour of a med school was like in high school. Didn't bother me at all. But like gory movies freak me the hell out.
I
Can't
think it's
explain it.
because it adds an emotional component to it. You know, I mean, like you. I mean, I did a full anatomy course in medical school. Didn't have a problem. A lot of kids walk in the first day and they're like throwing up. And it takes like a week for them to like get used to it. You know, I've sat in on surgeries and stuff. Didn't have a problem. Got mocked at by an anesthesiologist for saying it smelled like chicken. But it's different when you're watching Hellraiser. When you're watching Hellraiser, because it's adding this emotional component, you know, the music, it makes it unsettling. You know, you're just like, and you're thinking like there's a motivation behind it. It's not clinical. It's not like work. It was pretty intense.
Okay.
I feel like Hellraiser is probably like my breaking point. Oh, hello. Cats
Hi.
agree.
I'm glad we have a Dagger appearance in this. Hi, Dagger. Are you helping or
Dagger tried
hindering?
to watch Hellraiser with me this morning as well, but it was too much for him too.
He's
He
way
just
too young for
moved to the other
it.
side.
He's way too young for it.
He's too young. You're just a little baby.
Okay.
let's
Yeah,
move on.
I think we can move on from this. Our last movie on our list is Predator. And before this, so when I was hanging out with my siblings and cousins and such, and we talked about The Fly, they all hate horror, and I was telling them all the horror movies that they had watched, and they actually realized that they had watched a lot more than they thought, and they actually like a lot more than they thought. Predator is another isolation. They're trapped in the wilderness.
So I struggled though with calling this horror.
It is though.
I mean,
it is an action
later versions
horror.
of Predator are horror films, but this one didn't feel like a horror. Doesn't feel like a horror film to me.
You have something you can't see slowly picking off your group one at a time. That is like
It's
that's horror.
it's not as in your face about being horror as Alien is, for example,
No.
right?
Yeah, Alien to me is a true horror film. But Predator feels like an action film.
It is an action film, I think, first, but it is
Maybe because the first
certainly
30 minutes feels like Rambo 2.
Yeah, it is Rambo. But it is words are hard. It is an action movie first, I think, but it is definitely a horror movie second. And it is also a sci-fi movie when you break it down, because we get an alien with cool technology. But it is very much horror, and this is one of the ones I watched as a kid. A lot of these I watched as a teenager or young adult. But this one I actually watched as a kid. My parents turned this one on.
I love this one, and I love the second one. Absolutely, I think fantastic movies, different tone, but similar in that. Well, the second one, for sure, you know what's happening because you've seen the first one, ideally, right?
Yeah.
But what's relevant to me is what makes this horror for me is you don't know what the creature is in this movie when it starts out. You just see people dying, and you know it's something sci-fi related, right? You know it's something mysterious, but like you don't really get to see the full creature until later. And you know, like there's some gore to it. It's horror. You know, the people being skinned and left alive, hanging. Like it's very horror, very gory. But this movie's just so amazing. It's so amazing because it does go across different genres. And look, Schwarzenegger's not a great actor. Let's just be honest. But he's a great actor for this.
He is a great action movie actor.
Right.
So, like this, he's really, really good at. Terminator, he's really, really good at. But he did that movie, what was it? Twins with Danny DeVito.
Horrible.
It's-
So bad.
Yeah, okay, but Kindergarten Cop is one of the best movies ever made.
Again,
So
another action movie.
Puma.
I will
Come on.
look. I don't know. I struggle with Predator, and maybe it's because I'm such a big Alien fan. I love the Alien series so much that Predator just feels it doesn't quite hit the mark. I feel like the one that came out with Walton Goggins a few years back, I think that might have been Predators. That one I
Yes.
liked. This one I
Right.
appreciate because we get so many Schwarzeneggerisms, like
We do.
get
Yeah.
them to the chopper,
We do.
you know, and things
Yeah.
like that, or like, you know, where he throws the knife at the guy and he's just like, yeah. I mean, it's just you get so many of those like one-liners, but
Ah.
I don't know. The one scene I did like though, was, and it really surprised me because I watched this one yesterday as well. Really surprised me was the scene where the predator is in like the water, he's in the lake or something, and he starts like his circuitry or whatever is kind of fizzling out, and he starts coming into view. I was very shocked at how good that was.
It was
How
so
they,
good.
Special
they
effects were
that
amazing.
looked the special effects in that scene were very good. I was very shocked. I was very surprised. Yeah, but I don't know. I guess for me, because it feels too heavy on the action and less on the horror. Like as an action film, I guess I can appreciate it as an action film, but as a horror film, I just feel like there are more horror-esque Predator films than the first one.
I feel like the first one
I don't
is
know.
not the best horror film. But as the franchise continues, it does lean more into horror. But again, Friday the 13th, I'm not sure, is like
Also,
you were also saying it's not as much horror as the later movies in the franchise are definitely horror. I give it horror sub genre. It is not the main bit of it, but I give it horror, and I love
Okay.
it.
So what I think is fascinating about this, and it's not in this movie, it's in the next one, right? So Predator 2, that this happens. It's I actually look, this is pretty cool. Fun fact, Predator's kind of making fun of those action movies. To write it out. Badasses are getting killed until Arnold starts fighting smart. I mean, kind of. That is a big
Yep.
part of that is that just being an action hero got you killed in this movie because you're seen as the threat and the prey to go against. What I love about this is that the second movie ties into one of the best sci-fi horror franchises, which is not an 80s movie, right?
It
But it
is.
ties into Alien.
Mm.
Because on
Who,
the
when we
Alien,
were talking about this podcast, thought that Alien was 80s.
I did.
I
I
thought
forgot
it was
that
80s.
Alien
I
was.
completely forgot it was 70s. Sorry.
Yeah.
But continue, Joseph.
I
I
guess
mean, it's
because we were.
79, so it's right at the cusp of that, right? And I'm gonna be, I don't know if this is heretical or not, right? I don't like the original Alien movie as much as I like Aliens, the second one.
You just killed Marty.
I
Marty is now
Am
dead.
I hyperventilating?
I stand by
I mean,
the
a lot of
fact-
people prefer. Oh, okay. Here, a lot of people prefer Aliens to Alien. I get that, but Alien is a true horror film. Aliens is not to me. Alien is a horror film. Aliens, like Predator, I feel like it's way more on the sci-fi action film side of things.
I'm going to say that I did not like, I don't like Ridley Scott's adaptations after this one. This one I will give a pass because it started a franchise. It was actually very intense and horror related. I think James Cameron did a much better job of Aliens. And I think that when Ridley Scott stepped back in to kind of like assert control again with like Prometheus and the follow-ups, it didn't hit the way it needed to. I don't hate Prometheus, but I don't think Ridley Scott is a director as James Cameron. And I understand that that's probably going to get people to hate me, but that's okay. I'm okay with that.
No, I mean, I think a lot of people don't like the prequels. They don't like Prometheus. I love Prometheus. It's one of my favorite Alien movies, but not for the same reasons why I like Alien. But I think part of the problem with Alien, and one of the reasons why James Cameron, I think, stepped on board for Aliens is that the way Alien ends, it wasn't really set up to have sequels. It wasn't really set up to have for it to be a long-running franchise. And it's kind of, if you think about the setup of the first film, like the isolation kind of like setting where you defeat the creature and then you escape, it doesn't naturally lend itself to an easy segue into like a long running series. And I think James Cameron stepped in and was able to figure out how to make that transition from like an enclosed, isolated horror film to something that could spawn more films. So I do give him credit for that. But I don't know. It's still better than the Predator. It's still better than the Predator series.
We'll give him one cookie.
We'll give James Cameron a cookie. No, Aliens is a good movie. It's a good movie. But I love the first one. I don't know. And I love the evil in Prometheus. Where I love seeing that the alien is not evil. It's not. It's what man creates. That's evil. It's science gone wrong again, right?
I mean, look,
I was
fine.
So
like we create androids, and then the androids create creatures that then like destroy us.
Yes, we need to get into that in our AI episode we keep talking about, because I think that's a fascinating topic, because that's very much, I feel, a horror theme, even though most of the time it's in a sci-fi and action movie, is we have created robots,
Our own demise. Yeah.
who would then try and kill us. We create AI that then tries to kill us. I mean, it is a deep fear of humans. Like, we have this fear. So yeah, I think we had discussed delving into that again on a future podcast, and I'm looking forward to that because that would just be fun.
Ooh, we should do that next.
Semi-related. I think I heard that Predator is getting like a reboot as a series. That actually makes me more excited about Predator than the previous Predators.
Okay, so have you
Heard
seen
that it's,
Prey?
Like, yes. Okay, so Prey is perfection.
Okay.
Prey was perfect. Prey was great.
Okay. We
Okay,
are
we
in
all agree on
alignment.
that.
We're in alignment.
That is my favorite
We're all
Predator
in agreement
movie.
right now.
Yeah. So Prey is what I love about reinvigorating these old franchises. The way they did that by making it its own thing, adding a new perspective on it and a new dimension to it, bring a new kind of culture to the series. That was phenomenally done.
Yeah. I think just amazing.
Yeah. I'm in agreement.
What a great movie. Great movie.
Yeah. While we are all in agreement, this is the perfect time to close out our podcast. Instead of us arguing about who hates something more. So, with that being said, that concludes episode 9, Made in the 80s. We're so glad you tagged along. Please give us a like, subscribe if you haven't already, share our podcast with your friends and family. And our next episode will be a surprise to all of us.
It will be.
Going out to explore. Tune-in comes to another frackin' podcast. Time travel, wormholes, and more. Chevron's locked on another frackin' podcast. Debating all the lore. We get signal of another frackin' podcast. Nerdy topics galore. Systems go for another frackin' podcast.